say thousands of Iraqis are still wandering the desert, either looking to get home or looking for a place to surrender. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis are in the former battle zone throughout southern Iraq, with a large concentration southeast of Basra. The Allies say those Iraqis who have surrendered are suffering from malnutrition and dehydration.
Coming up, documenting the case of torture against Kuwaitis. We'll show you some of the videotaped evidence of the gruesome things Kuwaitis say Iraqi soldiers did to their people.
Reports of atrocities are widespread. According to CNN's Brian Jenkins, some 300 torture victims reportedly were delivered to a Kuwaiti hospital during the occupation. A word of warning, we have edited this report to remove the most gruesome pictures, but there remain scenes you may find disturbing. Now, Brian Jenkins' report.
He was 27 years old, doctors say, a father of 4 children, and his only apparent offense was being born a Kuwaiti. His torturers shot him in the back of his head, but doctors aren't sure if the gunshot came before or after half the man's body was burned away with acid. Another Kuwaiti male, also unknown, had his chest burned with cigarettes, his eyes plucked out, and his neck slashed.
We see kids, we see women, we see doctors, I mean, it's awful. It's nightmare. It's nightmare.
Hassan Mirza can't shake the image of an acquaintance, a woman in her 30s, brought in after 2 months of captivity.
The half of the head was taken off with an axe or something, and a bullet here through the mouth, and 3 bullets here, and also one, small scars around her body.
Did they rape her?
We didn't check on it, but they might do it.
This doctor is convinced some Iraqis did commit rape, and he can't erase the memory of one 45-year-old woman he treated.
She said, please give me an injection, do something, I want to die. I don't want to live after this day.
Verifying exactly how many people did die at the hands of Iraqis during the occupation has been next to impossible. Kuwaitis say the Iraqis brought only a small percentage of their victims to hospitals. Most were simply dumped on the streets or left outside their families' homes. Everyone here, it seems, has at least heard of such killings. This woman saw 3 bodies unloaded one night like garbage bags on her street.
One
of them had 2 shots, one in the head and one in the neck. And the other one had his hand chopped off, and the third with an axe on his head. And my mother ever since, or her mother ever since, has been sleeping in her bed. She couldn't the shock was too strong for her to handle.
The atrocities have left all Kuwaitis in a state of shock, unsure if they can ever again feel safe in their peaceful, affluent society, and wondering most of all what the cruelty and killing was for. Brian Jenkins, CNN, Kuwait City.
It is not clear yet just how the Iraqis will be held accountable for any war crimes. President Bush says he is not ruling out the possibility of a war crimes trial. He says the U.S. will not hunt down Saddam Hussein, but those who committed war crimes will not escape responsibility. More from CNN's Anthony Collins at the State Department.
As reports come in of Iraqi atrocities against Kuwaiti citizens, the United States is determined to bring the criminals to justice.
The reports are just sickening that are coming out of Kuwait. The person that actually perpetrated the tortures and the insidious crimes will be the ones that are held responsible.
One way or another, the administration also wants to see Saddam Hussein himself held accountable. President Bush was asked if the U.S. will hunt him down for any war crimes trial.
No, I'm not going to say that, not hunt him down, but nobody can be absolved from their responsibilities under international law on the war crimes aspect of that.
After World War II, the U.S., Britain, France, and the Soviet Union convicted captured Nazi officials of war crimes at Nuremberg. But Saddam Hussein is still at large. One administration hope is that Saddam would be ousted in a coup and put on trial by a new Iraqi government. Another possibility is to put him on trial in absentia, the way France put Nazi official Klaus Barbie on trial while he was a fugitive. But some U.S. officials fear a trial of Saddam in absentia might make a martyr out of him. Among possible war crimes charges being considered is abuse of U.S. prisoners of war. Some administration officials say a war crimes trial is possible without specifying who would conduct it.
Well, there is an effort on the part of the Kuwaitis to
identify those individuals who were responsible for the crimes that have been committed against Kuwait. I don't know whether or not that'll ultimately produce a war crimes trial of any kind. It's possible, I suppose. Whether to hold an international war crimes trial is one of the topics Secretary of State James Baker is scheduled to discuss on his trip to the Middle East next week.
Among the problems of setting up a coalition tribunal are the differences between Western and Islamic law, and trying to reach agreement on where the trial should be held, who should prosecute, and the specific charges and defendants. But the biggest problem of all, Saddam Hussein is not in coalition hands. Anthony Collins, CNN at the State Department.
When we return, a convoy moves out to help Kuwait down the road to recovery.
Occupation have been followed by 3 straight days of celebration. Joyous Kuwaitis paraded through their capital shouting and honking car horns. Others fired weapons into the air, but Kuwait radio is cautioning against that. It says at least 2 people have been killed by what it calls the haphazard use of gunfire. As the celebrating went on, the new U.S. ambassador to Kuwait took up his post. A military helicopter brought in Skip Ghanim directly to the embassy, which has been closed since former Ambassador Nathaniel Howell and his staff were pulled out in mid-December. Later, the U.S. flag Howell brought out with him was hoisted up again, and the new ambassador said thanks to the men and women who made that possible.
I'm very proud that I'm an American. I'm very proud to be part of the family and what's happened, and the President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and Force General Powell, and all of you, what you've done to make Kuwait free again, and it is.
State Department officials say Ghanim's first job will be providing technical advice to help the Kuwaiti government rebuild.
Saudi Arabia is helping its Kuwaiti neighbors recover from the Gulf War, starting from the inside out. CNN's Tom Mentier is in Kuwait City.
The living conditions in Kuwait City are bad, but U.S. officials who arrived here on Friday were expecting more damage than they found. Assessment teams came in expecting the worst after the Iraqi occupation, but say most of the city's public services can be restored quickly.
We should be able to turn it on here in a couple of days. We have engineers right now in the power plants making assessment.
The most pressing need for Kuwaitis still living here is food and water. On Friday, 72 semi-tractor trailers arrived in the capital loaded with necessities. The deliveries are the first of more than 4,000 truckloads that are expected to arrive here over the next 3 months. The Kuwaiti government has ordered more than $100 million of emergency food supplies to feed the people here.
We supply here in districts rice, mainly rice and sugar, cook oil and lentil and tomato paste and milk and children milk and this very necessary items.
In a country that is the land of plenty for oil supplies, there is surprisingly precious little available in the form of gasoline for automobiles. Because the Iraqis destroyed the electric generating plants, gas stations had been closed for more than a week. On Friday, the Kuwaiti government, with small generators, managed to open some gas stations and provide 30 liters of gasoline for anybody needing it, without charge. The free gas will continue every day while supplies last and as long as people are willing to wait in line. On this, the first day of major distribution, some people waited in line for nearly 7 hours. Most waited patiently to fill up the family car, but with no grocery stores, or for that matter any stores still doing business, there was nowhere to go. The parade of flag-waving Kuwaitis continued for nearly 10 hours through downtown streets. While they now have the ability to travel, it will take some time to rebuild the shops and businesses to put the economy here back on its feet. Until then, the people will continue to use their cars to visit relatives they haven't seen or were afraid to visit since the invasion by the Iraqis in August. Tom Mentier, CNN, Kuwait City.
Coming up, What will happen to Saddam Hussein? Is there a revolt brewing? A report when our coverage continues. International are calling for aid for Iraq. They're saying without it, disease and hunger could kill more people than the war. On a tour of Iraq, officials from the World Health Organization and the United Nations Children's Fund saw what they're calling a truly drastic situation. Sites included raw sewage in the streets, people taking drinking water from the river that others are using as a toilet. They said the threat of cholera, typhoid, and meningitis to children and pregnant women is building as the weather gets warmer. They said Iraq's health system has totally collapsed.
British newspapers are reporting the first signs of popular revolt against Saddam Hussein in the southern Iraqi city of Basra. And as CNN's Patricia Kelly reports, there is a groundswell of opposition to him throughout the Arab community there.
The bombing of Baghdad put paid to the one positive aspect of life under the rule of Saddam Hussein. Modernization has been severely set back by the bomb damage. The mumblings of discontent from a demoralized people faced with a ruined economy has been fueled by Western propaganda. Saudi Arabia's King Fahd has pledged to help any new leadership that emerges. He's been asked to release Iraqi prisoners of war by a former Iraqi defense minister in exile.
And if God wish, I will lead them to a victory which will get rid of Saddam Hussein and his regime.
Saddam Hussein achieved unity and stability through terror and repression in a country otherwise fragmented by numerous ethnic, political and religious groups, all at odds with each other.
The opposition groupings are mostly mature enough and experienced enough to realize that no one party, no one faction or strand can actually govern Iraq without the consent of others. That consensus is emerging.
The Kurdish people have long been victims of the Iraqi reign of terror, and although they've called a temporary truce, they still want an independent Kurdish state.
First of all, we would like to see a democratic Iraq based on the coalition government. That's the immediate really demand. That coalition government should prepare the nation and the country for a free election. The second, we need a full autonomy for Kurdistan.
Both the United States and Britain have decided to leave Iraq to settle its own internal accounts. They don't want to risk making a martyr of Saddam Hussein. Opposition Iraqis in exile are still cautious and still only talking about the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. They know he's a survivor, and most are convinced it will take a military coup to topple him from power. Patricia Kelly, CNN, London.
Meanwhile, phone service out of Kuwait may be restored this weekend. Most of the country's telephone communications were cut off after the Iraqi invasion. AT&T says it hopes to have some of the phones going again by late Sunday.
Coming up a little later in the broadcast, you'll see and hear how entertainers reached across the miles to show their support. Updating Gulf events, reports Iraq has tortured and killed 2 Allied POWs. The Associated Press says the report comes from a high-ranking officer in Saudi Arabia. The officer reportedly says the victims were probably British airmen. At a press conference on Friday, President Bush said the return of Allied POWs is one of his top concerns. He says he's irked by Saddam Hussein's continued hold on power in Iraq. The president says Saddam is not a target, but he hopes the Iraqi leader will face his crimes in court.
We are not targeting Saddam, and we have no claim on Iraqi territory.
Will we try to hunt him down for any kind of war crimes trial?
No, I'm not going to say that, not hunt him down, but nobody can be absolved from their responsibilities under international law.
Joyful Kuwaitis celebrated their 3rd day of freedom Friday by firing guns into the air and parading through the capital. The U.S. opened its embassy for the first time since December. Outside Kuwait City, testimony of Iraq's defeat litters the highway out of Kuwait. What was to have been the escape route for many Iraqi soldiers fleeing Allied troops instead became, for many, their graves.
The ceasefire has triggered U.S. congressional concern about returning Gulf War veterans. They will not be forgotten. CNN's Candy Crowley reports on some of the veterans' benefits bills now being considered.
The wish lists range from simple pleasures
Hey, Mom, get the beer ready, because I'm coming home.
to more general yearnings.
So now it's over, so I could be me again.
Is it a relief?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can see it. And go home and do what we did before.
Not since the day they left have things been as they were before. With their spouses deployed to the battlefront, the other halves have struggled to maintain equilibrium on the home front, emotionally and financially.
There's a lot of extra things that we don't do. I make a lot of chicken and dumplings and a lot of spaghetti, things that'll last 2 and 3 dinners. And you learn to stretch. You know, you wash the foil instead of throwing it out. It sounds kind of sick, but you don't flush the toilet every time. You know, that's 5 gallons right there.
Spouses left behind have faced a variety of increased costs, collect calls from the desert, higher child care bills, and those odd jobs once performed by the absent spouse. In its fervor to help out America's new heroes, Congress is now weeding through an estimated 100 bills to provide new veterans benefits or increase and alter existing ones.
We need educational benefits. We're going to help them get small business loans. We're going to make it easier for them to get home loans. We're going to raise the life insurance from $50,000 to $75,000. These warriors deserve it.
Also in the mill, proposals to boost hazardous duty pay and or provide each Gulf vet with a bonus, increase the veterans' medical care budget, establish a high-interest savings program, and a doubling of unemployment benefits. It's a night and day difference for long-time vets who could not get a 5.4% pay increase for disabled vets out of the last Congress.
But having been involved in veterans advocacy now for some 10 years or so, I've seen what's happened since the Vietnam War has been off the screen and how we've had underfunding throughout all veterans programs. And I'm afraid that it might be good these first couple of years, but I'm concerned about what it's going to be like 3 years and 4 years and 5 years down the line.
Today's heroes becoming yesterday's news is not the only problem facing the pricier veterans bills. Unlike the war effort, veterans benefits must be funded within the U.S. budget, a budget already constrained by competing interests in a recession. Candy Crowley, CNN on Capitol Hill.